The story of Cain's wife is one of the most intriguing and debated questions in the Bible. Cain, son of Adam and Eve, is known to have committed the first homicide, killing his brother Abel. However, the Bible mentions that Cain had a wife, but does not give explicit details about her origin or identity. The question of who Cain's wife was is an intriguing and frequently discussed topic in theology and biblical studies. According to Genesis 4 verses 16 to 17, after Cain was cursed by God for killing his brother Abel, he went to the land of Nod, located east of Eden. There, Cain met his wife, who conceived and gave birth to a son named Enoch. However, the Bible does not provide specific details about this woman's identity, her origins, or how she came to be. Several interpretations have been proposed over the centuries. One of the most accepted theories is that Cain's wife was one of his sisters or a niece, since Adam and Eve had many sons and daughters, as mentioned in Genesis 5 verse 4. The idea of marriages between siblings or close relatives was a necessity in the first generations of humanity to ensure the survival and propagation of the human race. Another perspective suggests that the Bible does not recount every detail of creation, implying that other humans could have been created besides Adam and Eve, or that, over time, the population grew enough for Cain to find a wife outside his family. Immediate circle. The theory that the direct descendants of Adam and Eve, including Cain, married close relatives, such as sisters or nieces, is one of the most discussed explanations in the context of the biblical narrative of Genesis. According to Genesis 5 verse 4, Adam and Eve not only had Cain, Abel, and Seth, but also many other sons and daughters throughout their lives. This suggests that Earth's early population was made up exclusively of their direct descendants. In this context, it is believed that Cain, after killing his brother Abel, married one of his sisters, or perhaps a niece. At the time, there were no divine or social laws prohibiting marriage between close relatives, as was later established in the Mosaic Law. Furthermore, humanity was in its early stages, and the genetic problems that might arise from such unions today were not a concern. The genetic code of the first human beings, according to this view, was still pure and not subject to the mutations and deteriorations accumulated over generations. This theory tries to answer the question of how humanity could multiply from just two people without compromising the coherence of the biblical narrative. However, it also raises theological and moral questions that have been debated by scholars and clergy for centuries. The idea that Cain married a close relative reflects a need to explain how humanity was able to expand and establish communities and cities, as described in Genesis. Already write to the YouTube channel to notify you that a new video has already been released here. Thank you. Finally, it is important to remember that, for many, the narrative of Adam and Eve, including explanations about marriages between their descendants, is understood within a mythological or symbolic context, and not necessarily as a literal historical account. Other interpretations suggest that the text may be using figurative language to describe deeper spiritual or theological realities, without intending to provide an exact genealogy of humanity. Pre-Adamic peoples, an alternative perspective on human history. The theory of pre-Adamic peoples proposes the existence of human or humanoid beings on Earth before the biblical creation of Adam and Eve. This idea suggests that there were other populations that were not direct descendants of the first human couple as described in the book of Genesis. Although this theory is less common and not widely accepted, it has been discussed in some theological, philosophical, and anthropological circles over the centuries. Origins of the theory. The idea of pre-Adamic peoples arose in part as an attempt to reconcile scientific discoveries, such as human fossils and genetic diversity, with the biblical narrative. Some proponents of this theory argue that hominin fossils found in different parts of the world, which are much older than the traditional dating of Adam's creation, can be explained by the existence of humans before Adam and Eve. Variations of the theory. There are different variations of this theory. Pre-Adamic hominids. Some suggest that hominin fossils found in various locations on the planet, dating back millions of years, represent a race of humans or humanoids that existed before Adam. Already write to the YouTube channel to notify you that a new video has already been released here. Thank you. Pre-Adamic humanity. Another version proposes that there were complete, culturally advanced human beings spread across different regions of the world before the creation of Adam and Eve. These human beings would not be subject to the same pact of salvation as Adam and his descendants. Adam as the first modern man. A less literal interpretation suggests that Adam and Eve were the first modern humans, the first to possess souls and moral consciousness, while pre-Adamic beings existed as human forms, but without these spiritual characteristics. Criticisms and controversies. The theory of pre-Adamic peoples is widely criticized by traditional Christian theologians, who believe that it contradicts the fundamental biblical doctrine that all human beings are descended from Adam and Eve. According to the biblical account, Adam is seen as the first man and the origin of all humanity, and Eve as the mother of all living. Genesis 3 verse 20. This belief is essential to the doctrine of original sin, which holds that Adam's sin affected all humanity. Furthermore, the theory of pre-Adamic peoples can raise complex theological questions about the nature of sin, the need for salvation, and the role of Jesus Christ as Redeemer of all humanity. Final considerations. Although the theory of pre-Adamic peoples offers an intriguing view of human prehistory and attempts to harmonize scientific discoveries with the biblical narrative, it remains a controversial and little accepted idea among Christian theologians. For many, acceptance of this theory would imply a significant reinterpretation of biblical texts and established Christian doctrines. Thus, most Christian traditions continue to uphold the belief that Adam and Eve were the first and only ancestors of all humanity. Symbolic representation of Cain's wife, an allegorical analysis. Already write to the YouTube channel to notify you that a new video has already been released here. Thank you. The biblical narrative about Cain and Abel is one of the oldest and most significant accounts in the Judeo-Christian tradition. Within this story, the mention of Cain's wife raises diverse interpretations and debates, especially with regard to her identity and role. A fascinating insight is that Cain's wife should not be understood as a literal figure, but as a symbol representing something broader and deeper. According to some allegorical interpretations, Cain's wife can be seen as a symbolic representation of the expansion and diversity of humanity. Instead of being a concrete person whose origin is directly explained in the text, it symbolizes the idea that the human lineage diversifies and expands over time. This perspective suggests that Genesis, in part, should be read not just as a literal account, but as a narrative that carries deep meanings about human nature and its evolution. The allegory of Cain's wife can be understood as a way of approaching the issue of the multiplication of the human population in a way that goes beyond the literal details of the story. Rather than looking for a scientific or historical explanation for the existence of people beyond Adam and Eve's immediate family, this interpretation sees the text as a metaphor for humanity's growth in terms of diversity and complexity. Furthermore, this view is in line with the idea that parts of Genesis and biblical texts in general may contain layers of meaning beyond the surface narrative. Scholars who take an allegorical approach often argue that these stories should not be read simply as historical accounts, but as symbolic representations that reflect universal truths about human experience, relationships, and the evolution of societies. Already write to the YouTube channel to notify you that a new video has already been released here. Thank you. In this way, Cain's wife, under this symbolic interpretation, becomes a reflection of humanity in its process of expansion and development. She is a figure who embodies the concept of growth and diversification of human lineages, offering a perspective that broadens the understanding of Genesis as a work rich in symbolism and deep meaning, rather than a purely historical or literal text. Leave your opinion in the comments.